I'm a talkative person. Because I'm an SE dom, it's like my only world is the physical. My words are the only means of me getting out my meaning and intention. We'll see if I eat those words.
Should be entertaining others all the time.
This is exactly where I wanted to go with it. I would not dare to fist bump on a podcast where people can hear me. You guys ready to go?
Yeah, keen.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Literally No Subtext podcast. I am here with a woman who needs no introduction. It is one of my favorite type creators in the space, the lovely INFJ, Joyce Meng. Hi Joyce, how are you today?
I'm doing dandy today. I'm getting ready to go to my local Myers-Briggs meetup, meet some type geeks, and then also talk with you too. So I'm getting my Myers-Briggs fix.
That's so cool. When you say local type meetup, do you mean people like in person?
Yeah, I think that in Canada, in our area, Toronto, it's the largest Myers-Briggs meetup in person. So
Wow.
thriving.
That's awesome. How many people do you get at a regular meeting?
Probably like 30 to 40.
30 to 40.
With
That's so
only
cool.
last minute advertisement because the leader is an ENTP who was like, 40 minutes before the event, let's post it.
Yep, love it, love it. That seems to be the theme of the day, as I only gave Joyce some of the instructions that I wanted her to do for this interview about 12 hours before the interview. So, and I have not prepped her with the questions at all. So this is your interacting with EP chaos kind of day, isn't it, Joyce?
I wouldn't have it any other way.
I love it. And for anyone who lives in the Toronto area, consider this an advertisement for that cool Myers-Briggs meetup. So get in touch with Joyce. I don't know if I can volunteer your services like that, but get in touch with Joyce if you'd like to be part of that meetup.
Yeah, it's great. The more the merrier. Yeah, the ESFP quality of including everyone. Let's all get on the bandwagon.
Love it, love it. Okay, so for those who do not know who Joyce is, although she needs no introduction really, but Joyce is known specifically, I would say, for you're known on your YouTube channel for conducting these wonderful social experiments called type talks. I think that's a word that comes to mind to describe them, where you get lots of people of the same, it can be the same type or similar temperaments or different types, sharing a few functions, sharing no functions, lots of different combinations come together and talk about their similarities and differences. She's got a thriving YouTube channel. You've just hit 14,000 subscribers. Congratulations for that. Yay. Yay.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, for sure. And you have over 400 videos as well. So now if you are looking for some Myers-Briggs nuance, Joyce's channel is absolutely the place to go to hear from people themselves who are of the type in question, talk about their life experience. I have been part of a few of those interviews myself. I've enjoyed every single one of them. And I learn more about myself than I expect every time I go on your videos. So thank you for what you do for the community, Joyce.
Oh, I appreciate that. And if I am saying that I sound excited, but I don't sound super excited, I'm both happy and I'm scared at the same time. And so that the performance anxiety of the extroverted sensing lost comes up. But it's a real privilege to get to talk to people like you, Kristen, because you're such a ray of joy. So I'm called Joyce, but you're the true joy.
Joyce is already doing the thing that she does where she compliments the people that she talks to. She gives that NFJ the words of affirmation that that I, as an ESFP, crave. So it's one of the reasons I love talking to you, Joyce. Now, I'm going to try my hardest, audience who are listening, to keep the conversation focused on Joyce and the fact that she is an INFJ. But we've got to keep in mind that NFJs have a way of sneakily turning the conversation so that the FI user involved ends up talking about themselves. Now, that has happened a lot in my life, and I'm going to be on guard for it today to make sure that it doesn't happen. So, Joyce, let it be known that I'm going to be watching you for that sneaky tactic and keeping the questions focused on you.
Sounds good. We don't want to turn this into a let's learn about an ESFP today episode. As Joyce derails it about Kristen. It's like, who's interviewing who now?
That's right. Although I probably will learn something about myself in this interview, because I always do when I talk to you, Joyce.
Yeah, let's get to it. I'm excited to be interrogated. Bring it on.
Great. So, everyone, I asked you to contribute some questions on my Instagram. I submitted a little form for you to contribute some questions for an INFJ, and I gave the added disclaimer that this INFJ knows a lot about Myers-Briggs and type theory. So we got quite a lot of questions. I won't be able to ask all of them, unfortunately, because there were too many for us to cover in this one episode, but I've selected about 25 that I think we'll be able to hopefully get through. But I'll start with a question of my own, Joyce, which is, what is it that motivates you to keep producing Myers-Briggs content?
I think what keeps me producing this content is that this has been the biggest long-standing hobby of my life. It's mind candy. You can always think about it and theorize deeper about humankind and its condition. And I think what keeps me here is it's the starting place for some of the deepest conversations in your life. It's a conversation about personality. And so I think it's an excuse to talk deep really fast. And so as a person who has been seen as going too deep too quickly, this gives me an excuse to figure out a facet of someone, or to have an inkling and then have them also add nuance from their perspective of how it's like to be them. So I think that type is as intricate as learning about someone's DNA. Like, it's the starting place, and then the variations are endless. And I also think that in personality type, I've felt understood in a way that I haven't really in my life beforehand. So I've always felt different from a young age. I just didn't know what to call it. And so I thought, am I gifted? Am I an indigo child? It's like this. I thought I was psychic, and then I didn't think I was psychic. And then I also, that's what an indigo child is, like the deep child that can see into the future. And then I wondered if I was autistic, because I knew that there was something off about me, but I just didn't know what exactly. And when I learned about being an INFJ, it was like, oh, that's why when I try to make things go deep, people try to like change the subject, or they respond with something where it feels like it's not satisfactory for some conversations in my life. And I had no way of explaining it other than like, why does this keep happening? I feel like a one-sided mirror in my life where I'm able to see someone else clearly, but you never get that experience of being seen back clearly. And so it was a relief. It was a question that I've always been itching for the answer for, and I never had the vocabulary to put it into words. So that's why, like, I believe type is real on almost a visceral level, because it applied to my life so much. And it was my ENFP friend who got me mega into it, because she was able to immediately type me and everyone around us, just like how your sister Jenna was able to type you. And so she really made me believe in the reality of it, because I was like, how do you know it without even me saying anything to you about my result? And so with that initial curiosity, and also just having the chance to talk about it at length my entire life, it did create an obsession, in the sense that I feel like with personality, I could talk about it forever. And so Myers-Briggs is a way to talk about my favorite thing, which is human beings and human behavior, and trying to find the root cause of it, or even realizing certain points in my life, they're more colorful when you, like, it's a lens of meaning. So there's just so many wonderful aspects to type. Like, initially it was created as a tool for world peace. And so even what it symbolizes is, once you understand people's differences, when were previously baffled at their behavior, you can give it compassion and grace. And I'm always looking for ways in which I can provide other people a more loving explanation for their behavior, because I don't want to carry around negative emotion or resentment, or these other things from relationship failures. I want to understand how it is like to create a relationship that doesn't fail. Because for some people, they believe that the best part of a relationship is at the beginning, and it just gets worse after that. They're like, after we get our first fight, there are like these irreconcilable differences or like pains that like linger in the relationship. And there's a part of me that wonders about how can we create relationships where there's less of that lingering resentment, so that relationships actually get better over time, that it's not just a honeymoon period and that's all you have to look forward to and then it's just downhill from there. How do you love a person the same as you first loved them? Maybe not with the same level of spark, like that chemistry, but like you have a different kind of chemistry that's still just as good but in a different way. I know a lot of NFJs who don't want relationships to go stagnant. They realize that, people get complacent in their relationships over time, but they want to find the formula to creating like an exciting or engaging relationship or a very loving and deep one throughout the entire way, that it doesn't have to become watered down over time. And it might be idealistic, but that's one of the things that keeps me loving type. There's a way of thinking about it where you can actually create a way of loving people in a more honest way. You can confront your shadow. You can understand other people. It's like all of the NF values, but you can actualize them deeper and deeper as you learn type.
It's interesting you say NF values, because I was thinking as you were talking, like for you to have such passion about this, to be doing it for as long as you do, it's obviously got to correspond with your personal values. But I've had a few conversations with NFJs where I'll ask them, what are your personal values? And they really struggle to answer that question. And you've just said the NFJ values. And that's something that I would never say about like an FI user, for instance, like the FI values, because they're so different. So like from person to person. So what would you say your personal values are? And do they help to carry your work? And is that a question that you struggle to answer? And would you say those values correspond with other NFJs' values?
Yeah, I've had a lot of time to think about this. The reason why I know my values is because I've looked at other NFJs, and through like a detached observation, I've seen like the trend of things that they care about. And so I'm like,
wow.
I can deduce from that I probably care about the same things around here too. It's usually around the ways of having like sustainable relationships that are as strong as you can possibly make them to be, that may not even exist in today's world. And I find when I do typing sessions with NFJs and I ask them, can you use words to explain who you are, they'll be quiet, and sometimes they don't know the words to describe who they are. Whereas if I ask an FI user, like, what are some words you would use to describe yourself, they can go bam, 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 bam.
Yeah, immediately.
Yeah, and so I don't want to fall into the same kind of FJ trap. So I'm like, I see FJs not being able to describe themselves all the time, and I want to become the most actualized version of my type. So what would happen if I tried to build this side of myself? Like, I think one of my goals in type is to almost like, now that I understand my type, how can I grow in a way to see how far an INFJ can grow so that they don't seem like an INFJ anymore? I wonder how that would look like. And
wow,
like, I would probably still seem like an INFJ, but like, you get to push the mental boundaries, because I feel like sometimes when people are in type, they feel pressure to be their type. So they act more and more the stereotype. And I'm like, this is not what Carl Jung would have wanted. He actually, he says that he wishes people to not treat type like a parlor game. And so not trying to characterize each other or put each other into boxes, but instead use it to grow each other. And so like, I want to kind of make Daddy Young proud.
Daddy Young. I love that. So how would you, I guess, describe yourself?
Oh, you're asking the tough questions.
What are some words that describe you?
Yeah. I would say warm but detached. So there's this element of I can be very caring or kind, but always I can feel like a mist too. So, or a mirage. So it's like you feel close to me, but you can never grab me. And so it's like it goes past your fingers, it disappears in it.
The INFJ experience, or the experience of knowing an INFJ. That rings true in some of my INFJ friendships. Sometimes I'm just sitting there and I feel like I'm talking to them and I feel like I'm putting my entire self on the table and I just long for them to do the same. And I like to think and hope that they are in their own way doing the same. But I'm also like, who are you really? Like, what do you really think? You know, because sometimes I'll see a little nuanced facial expression where I'm like, you don't agree with me on that, or you have a different opinion, but I want us to fight about it. Like, let's get into a heated debate. And, you know, what are some of your values, like, that we can flesh out together, you know? Because that's how I like learning about people, and that's how I like bonding with people, is learning that deep side of themselves. And I feel like I'm giving that when I'm in most of my conversations. But I don't necessarily feel that way about INFJs when I talk to them. So the mist thing is a good analogy.
It is. And I find FI users, they teach me about who I am. So I'll have people like you, Kristen, or my ENFP friend who's like, Joyce, you're not being who you are. And I'm like, who am I even? Like, how do I know if I'm not being me if I don't even know who me is?
Yeah.
I think that you guys do see like a consistent core. So you guys remind me to be more cognizant of that too. And I think that you guys even tell me when I'm not focusing on me enough too. And I feel like you guys call me out in all the right ways. Another word I guess I would use to describe myself, and this is kind of pretentious, so I actually would not want to say this in a podcast, but it's insightful. And I think a lot of NI dominants would actually describe themselves like that. And I think it's
100%, and it's a fair word.
Yeah, we tend to only say the surface of the iceberg of what we're seeing, and then we'll try to like explain deeper if we know it's safe to say that around people, because we've had times in our lives where we've gone deep into an analysis of something and someone has zoned out and we can tell. Yeah. So, but when we say something that's like 5% of our actual opinion, and our opinion actually has like 95% of more to it, it takes a while to get out, like a sink where you have to get like the dirty water out before the clean water comes out.
Yeah, that must be really challenging, because I've often thought that about INFJs and also INFPs. I just get this sense of there's something so complex and insightful that's going on in their mind that they feel that words don't do justice. Like, no amount of words or conversation with someone will actually get across what they're trying to say, and that must be frustrating.
Yeah, although I feel like I can eventually articulate it as long as we stay on the same subject. So what happens, I think, is like I'll
Rip
talk
NE
about it,
users.
and then it gets derailed.
Who's the type that you feel that happens the most with, Joyce?
But it's wonderful too. I think I catch any users off guard because they'll say an offhanded idea that they've had, and then I'll bring it up like a few weeks later or after I've done processing it, and then they're like, Joyce, that was just an idea I didn't really care about, but you took it quite deep there.
And then the pain, it's like a stab in the heart for you.
Yeah.
You're like, you didn't care about the topic I was talking about, and like then your FE might be like, oh no, did I keep that conversation going when I shouldn't have?
Exactly.
So warm, insightful, are those words that you would use? Like, obviously you would use them to describe yourself. What about, like, if I was to stretch that, what about how do you define yourself if you were to choose words? Would that be possible? Would you still use the same words?
Yeah, I would use insight and foresight. So it is like looking deeply into the implications of something, human implications usually. And it is like a philosophical pondering about the meaning of life and other people, how they play into it, and are we actually reaching who we could actually become so it's all of like, it's restless to think about, like restless and always thinking about potential in a sense. So how they say that a creative person is condemned to create, I feel like an INFJ is meaning that is condemned to seek meaning. So like because you want to know about meaning, you can't help but need it. It's almost like an SE dominant who is antsy in their chair and they need to eventually get up and do things or experience life. It's like an INFJ is condemned to always feel the pang of wanting to find more meaning. And if they don't feel like they can have meaningful enough conversations or have that time or space to really ponder, it actually erodes their soul in some way. So
Interesting. So that's what you would use to define yourself.
Yeah, I guess the quest for consciousness is possibly, yeah, like the desire to get to be acquainted with the principles of life and what comprises people in the human experience. I think I define myself as a person who loves to think about relationships and life itself.
Okay.
So I guess I define myself more about like with my thoughts and my inner worlds. That's more real to me.
What about if that changes? Then does who you are change?
No, because I don't think about it in terms of my identity. So it's not attached to my identity.
Oh, that's interesting. When I say define yourself, I guess I just mean identity.
I don't know if FE users always think about their identity.
Interesting. Yeah, because all those qualities associated with the ESFP personality, like even needing to get up and move and stuff, as you just said, I would never use those words to define myself. I would use those words to describe my personality, but my personality and my tendencies that, you know, are the same as the ESFP next to me are not words that I would use to define the essence of Kristen and who Kristen is.
Yeah, and I guess that would take us out of type. If I were to just describe my essence, that would be my joyousness. So I think
Yeah, your joyousness. You don't have to tell me about that if you don't want to. Like, we don't need to go too far out of type, but I'm just trying to I'd love to hear it, of course. As an FI user, I would love to hear your answer to that question, but I wouldn't want you to share more than you would like to share. But I guess I'm just touching on whether that has something to do with type. Like, the fact that you can separate your joyousness from, like, questions about defining yourself through a Myers-Briggs lens. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, because I think my joyousness, what makes me an individual is that I actually think that I care more about the darker side of the life in terms of like examining it and being acquainted with it, because I've had to at a young age.
Okay.
Like, I had sensing parents who were like, I have no hope for you, child. And
Wow.
so I've always had to, like, because I'm not a very practical person, and you can kind of know that. And so I've always had to deal with, like, how do you believe in yourself when you've had no one to believe in you? And other things, I've had to, like, reconcile my journey with CPTSD and all of that stuff. And so, like, type is also a part of that healing process of how do I figure out how to make sense of reality in a way where I can fully integrate myself, because I think there are parts of me that are still grieving the lack of acceptance. I think Joyce is a person who is obsessed with understanding the darkness of the human condition to find closure within certain parts of my own experience too. It's like a word I really like is containment. And they say that when you haven't had early attachment figures who mirror back your experiences and your strengths back to you, you actually don't know who you are. Regardless of if you're an FI user or an FE user, there's a condition called alexithymia. And this is basically if people have neglected you in some way, you actually have difficulty accessing how you feel, who you are, and defining that. And there's a principle of physics I really love, and it's nothing operates in isolation. And so we actually cannot understand ourselves in isolation.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And so, yeah, a lot of this is a healing journey.
I like that because it's kind of saying as well that it's kind of like your suffering or your hard life experiences that shape who you actually are.
They do, yeah. It is where crisis is that the personality we have, the growth is amplified.
Yeah.
So hitting rock bottom, it either paralyzes people or it's the biggest catalyst in your life for some huge
100%.
Yeah, paradigm shift.
100%. And there's so many different, I would say I had crises in my life, and for a few years I was kind of stagnant and suppressed what was really going on. But then once I faced it and confronted it, that's when the biggest growth of my life happened, and actually set me on the trajectory to becoming a person I was actually proud to be. I'm doing it. I'm doing the FI. I'm doing the turning it around and talking about my life story. But it's relevant. And so I definitely deeply resonate with that. And I think it's great that you've brought that up, because I couldn't separate my hard struggles from basically anything that I use to define myself these days. I don't know, I'd have to actually think about that statement before I could say it so solidly.
Yeah, I really do think it filters everything you go through. It might not define you, but it is something that forever changes you. It's the experience of being in the abyss. So the dark experiences that we go through, the traumas,
yeah,
you can almost see them like the sun. If you look directly at it, it'll blind you. But if you look around in your world, it colors everything you see.
Yeah.
So these formative events, they change your philosophies. Because they teach you something about yourself. And like everything is either a blessing or a lesson. And so in a way, you find the something out of it that you were supposed to find.
Yeah. And I feel like when we don't face those, they actually distort our reality. Like, I think when you actually face the hardship and maybe some of the traumas you've been through and work through them, that's when the color can really start to seep through, and your ability to experience profound human emotions. It's like the world that was grayscale becomes color. But when you're suppressing, I think it can just distort, not necessarily color, how you're seeing things.
Yeah, absolutely. So
yeah,
I love how we went into the FI days right here.
Of course. Yeah, so interesting. And we haven't even touched on any of the questions yet from the Instagram people. Yeah, because the things that I would say would define myself, like is even just my love of type and relationships and people. I would not have those interests if I hadn't gone through what I had. So anyway, it's a huge question, identity. But I just wanted to throw that out there. And you have you seem to have a really great understanding of your identity and who you are. Like, you knew how to answer those questions. Like, you've thought about this.
I had an ENFP friend for 10 years of my life. I have had an FI user browbeat me with knowing who I am.
Amazing.
I think the thing is I've had to learn it the hard way. My ENFP friend, when I would hang around people who would make me less of myself, she'd be like, "It's poison, Joyce." And so I'm like, okay, and I really have to be aware of this. She's taking this real seriously.
Yeah.
So it's almost like an FI hack. It's like, because I know someone else cares about my identity, I'm able to care about it because I care about them. So out of their care, now I feel incentive to know myself, so they will be happy.
Amazing. The joy of an FI friendship. And any FJs who might be listening, use this as fodder to contemplate this question for yourself. Who are you? What is your identity? How do you define yourself? That's your homework. All right, Joyce, we are going to jump into some of these questions from my Instagram followers. And you told me before we turned on the camera that you have actually become very good at being succinct in your answers. I think you likened yourself to an ISTP in that sense. So let's put that to the test.
Let's do it. Yeah. I'm even being silent, like just like an ISTP, waiting for
the first question. Okay, so first question. How does an INFJ experience their NI in contrast with an INTJ? And another question I got was, how did you know you're an INFJ, not an INTJ? Different questions, and I think we'd probably need to talk about the difference between FI and FE. But let's see if we can make a distinction between how an INFJ experiences their NI versus an INTJ.
Yeah, it would be what it's linked to. It would be, for an INTJ, they have TE and FI. So their NI is experienced in a way where they're able to look at the sustainability of systems, but impersonal systems, and maneuver around those. And an INTJ is also going to have that introverted feeling of knowing who they are, having that sense of identity, and almost sometimes mulling over in extensive thought how things will impact their sense of identity and character. And so you'll have an INTJ, let's say they're a life coach. If they wear glasses, they're going to wonder, how is that going to impact how my identity comes across to other people? So it's not necessarily focusing on how other people feel, like an INFJ would, but it's like focusing on how do I feel about the kind of person I am, is going to be an INTJ. An INTJ is also going to refer more to facts and figures. So give you more statistics like, oh, this is like 10% of that, or like focus more on externally verifiable things like science says this, or other TE fact points. Whereas with an INFJ using NI is going to be more from their own personal reasoning, usually. It's like giving you their extensive thoughts that they've personally thought through. An INTJ is going to do that too, because they're introspecting. But an INTJ's inner world is that actually heavily emotional and passionate about certain things related to identity and things important to them. Yeah, so I guess that's the somewhat technical answer. INFJs, like we said, focus more on other people's feelings and actually inside their NITI creating thoughts that are consistent with their other thoughts. Whereas an INTJ is going to care less about being consistent in their inner worlds. Like an INTJ is going to want more of a consistent identity and integrity with their who they want to be, who they see themselves as. Whereas an INFJ, if they're an Enneagram 1, might care about that, but an INFJ has more of a detached, they don't really think about their identity when they're reasoning. It's more about like this big picture reasoning about human beings and the root cause of human conduct. So
it's kind of impossible to answer the question, of course, without bringing in the difference between FI and FE. Would you say like if we were to make a really baseline distinction between FI and FE, you brought up in your answer just then that the INTJ really focuses on things to do with personal identity, and they can't detach that from how they operate in the world. And for an INFJ, they will inevitably consider others. Is that, I guess, the main distinction you would make between FI and FE at the end of the day?
Well, that's one of them. FE is more of trying to do something externally to make things land on people. This is what happens when I try to think on the spot. I know that there's more nuance, but I think right now I don't have the words to articulate it.
You're doing great. Fair enough. It's probably hard to. You've done so much study of type and so much analyzing of people to be able to answer something off the cuff that is as complex as that would be hard. I think I would also struggle to answer that on the spot.
I appreciate the empathies.
No worries. Okay. Next question. Can you give us an example of using your introverted intuition in an everyday situation?
When it comes to using my introverted intuition on a day-to-day basis, I think it's you look at a thing, but instead of looking at the thing, you're thinking about the meaning and implications behind it. So like, let's say I look at a leaf that fell from a tree. Instead of seeing the surface characteristics, I immediately, like let's say someone could look at a leaf and they're like, oh, it's orange, or it's crunchy, or it's other things. Like I would look at the leaf and it would instantly possibly bring a thought or an impression in my mind about something that I've been contemplating already, but going a little deeper into it. You can't help but try to see if something is linked to this other life behind it. Like, what is the reason behind... I wonder how people are similar to nature, in that all living things live and die, just like we will live and die. And so I wonder, how can we be more present in the way that we live? So instead of just being being present as a natural default state, I get there in a roundabout way of maybe philosophizing about the importance of presence and how it, like, nature really shows us, like, oh, we really do have this one kind of life. And there's so much life going on around us that if we pay attention to it, it'll tell us something about the way that we should be living. So yeah.
That must be overwhelming when you're like walking down the street and you're experiencing several hundred different sensory pieces of stimuli, and each of them would be triggering some kind of deeper thought. But or is it more the case that you'll be walking and then you'll see a leaf and you'll go on this sort of inner monologue, and then you tune out to everything else and you kind of just exist in your introspective world as you continue to walk?
There is that tuning out.
Tuning out.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then so you probably wouldn't notice much sensory stuff after that when you're thinking about something else, except if someone like punched you in the face.
Yeah. Unless I purposefully try to include it.
Amazing.
I'm like, oh, I'm going to be visiting Kristen, so I don't want her to see me as absent-minded, so I'm going to look around.
Look around, but not really taking in anything. Or not really seeing anything. Fascinating. Gosh. Yeah, key difference between us for those listening. Obviously, as an INFJ, Joyce uses SE as her fourth function, but it's my first, and I'm the opposite. It's very hard for me to ignore the external world and go into some kind of inner monologue. I can even lose my train of thought very easily if I'm walking with someone, but I'm in a buzzing environment. I just want to stop talking and just kind of fully pay attention to what's going on around me, and it won't necessarily trigger any deeper thoughts. So
I think an illustration of what we're talking about is my ENFP friend once told me, everything's not as deep as, not everyone is as deep as you think that they are. So I think the thing with being an NI dominant is you actually go through the world thinking that other people have this rich inner life because you have this rich inner life. And then you're jarred when other people tell you that doesn't exist. Yeah. Or if you come to the reality that sometimes it is just simple.
Yeah. That's an important life lesson for INFJs. How long did it take you to learn that? Did it take your ENFP friend pointing that out?
Yeah, and I think...
And did you believe it?
It's kind of a disheartening reality to believe in a sense. But I do believe it. I have to remind myself of it every day. So I actually forget about that assumption. I forget about that assumption. Because I think there's a part of the SE in my stack where what you experience in front of you right now is a blank slate, and you just experience it with no expectation. And so in a sense, I always default back to, oh, I'm interacting with something else that has a rich inner life until thrown out of that assumption. So that's
Amazing.
the way in which I don't learn my lesson.
Yeah, I was the opposite growing up. I didn't know people had rich inner lives and were taking things so seriously as they were. And I misunderstood a lot of people as a result. All right, let's move on to the next question. Were you ever confused whether you were an INFP? If so, how did you realize you were an INFJ?
Yeah. So when I had my ENFP friend and we would talk about type, I would challenge her typing just to see what she would say. I feel quite confident with the INFJ typing. When I've wondered INFP, as in like just as a thought experiment, my ENFP friend gave this explanation. She's like, all right, Joyce, you almost got hit by a car, or you watched someone get hit by a vehicle. And your first thought was not an emotion. And so, Joyce, if you were an INFP, you'd go directly to feelings. So, like, because it would be like your own feeling about the, like, oh, noticing someone getting hit by a bus, which of course I do have too, right? But the INFP will be more like, probably, you'll see more of the FI being shown. And whereas like for you, Joyce, you actually go deep into like, what does this mean? Like that is your first response of something.
Wow.
So I don't take things to FI right away. I actually take things more in a contemplative, calm state.
Yeah.
And I'm always in like a Zen, contemplative, calm state. So would be my argument against INFP. And I think it's also how intentional I am. So like my ENFP friend was like, you can see how I understand myself through people. So this is another thing which makes me not an INFP, because I think FI users understand themselves enough to describe themselves. So they can list off things, where as an FE user will sometimes describe how other people describe them, because I don't really know who I am, but I know I know how other people talk about me. So she said that everything I do, it has a reason. So I'm organized in the sense that like I have the general sense of purpose, and then everything is coordinated in a cohesive way to show that. And it doesn't have that like scatteredness that extroverted intuition has. It's too composed in a sense.
Yeah. Good explanation. Now, if you were asked, so say you're in the scenario where you saw that person get hit by a bus. If you were asked about 2 hours after the incident, how did that make you feel? Would you be able to answer that? Do you think?
I think it would be difficult, but I'm more detached from my emotions than a regular INFJ would, because I have alexithymia. So I don't know how I'm feeling usually about most things. But I think that's strange for an INFJ. It's more of like a little bit of a trauma response too.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. So you think a lot of other INFJs would be able to answer that?
There are some INFJs who wouldn't be able to tell you how they feel, and there's some who would. I think it would be a split vote.
Case by case, yeah.
Whereas for INTPs, TI users would have the hardest absolute time knowing how they feel.
TI users, yeah, for sure. In my experience, that's true. Is it insolent if I tell what people... I think what this person's trying to say is it insolence if I tell people what their Myers-Briggs type is, even if they get bothered by it? How do I deal with that? So this is a question about how we should be employing Myers-Briggs in our general conversations, typing people in the wild. Should we be doing it? Should we be telling people about it, even if they don't want to? And how do they deal with that?
Yeah, I work for the Association of Psychological Types, so I'm only allowed to answer this in one way, which is it's not ethical to type other people. You can help them on their type journey, and you can give them options. Like, oh, if they ask you, like, I can see you as this. But, like, being very adamant about a person's type to them, it turns people off of type. So you're not a good marketer, even though you might be right.
Yeah.
So you kind of need people to arrive at it themselves for them to believe in it. It's just like how they said the best leaders make you think that the choice was yours. So
Yeah.
in a sense, you can provide people evidence, or you can direct conversation. You can employ the Socratic method to get people to see their own type more clearly. If you had like a direction you knew that it was at, but you can't enforce or tell people what they are, because it turns them off because they feel boxed, and then it makes type look bad as a whole. So I would say for all of our reputations, we don't want to be seen as the type Nazis. So if we seduce people into type, we're more likely to have a happier community.
Yep.
Like lubricate what you say before you say it.
Yep. 100%. Good answer. Do you think we can consciously develop our 5th to 8th functions?
Yeah, I have a theory on this. Your 6th function is actually, they say, your strongest shadow function. And this was, Dario Nardi created the quiz Keystone Cognition. It's a very common function test taken online. And he has associates, Mina Bariani. She is also a scientist. I'm misquoting this, so the details might be a little bit off. And also a guy called Mark Majors. He created his own assessment too. And they all arrived at the conclusion that people who would take their quiz actually have a very strong 6th function. So let's say an INTP actually scores very high on TI, NE, and NI on online cognitive function quizzes. And the reason for it is your 6th function, you have the ability to develop it into a very competent function, although you'll never value it as much as your 2nd function. So for Kristen, she has amazing FE. It's just she won't value it over FI. So if FI is ever in competition with FE, she will always pick FI. And you could see this all across the board with individuals. Conversely, people tend to say that your 7th function is your weakest function. And then your 5th and 8th, you can actually develop. And I'll explain to you how you can synthetically create this function. So with your 8th function, so for Kristen, if we were use you as an example, it's NE. There's so many overlapping qualities of SE and NE. Like there's that quality of needing stimulation, exploration, and being open-minded, curious. And they can look similar. And so in some ways, you can maybe stimulate a NE-looking kind of train of thought.
But stimulating an NE train of thought, is that actually using NE?
I can give you an example of an INTP. This might make more sense. So this is me trying to think on the spot. You get like this kind of baked idea that I'm trying to... I feel like TI users cannot... Like TI, NI... So like... INFJs and ISTPs can be articulate as long as they've fully thought through the thought in their head first. Otherwise, if I try to articulate it when it's half formed, you're going to get like a bleh. And that's going to be messy and not make as much sense. So,
welcome to my life.
Yep. I think you're actually very articulate, Kristen, and very charming. So,
Thank you.
One of the most charming people I've met. But I don't want to embarrass you, so...
Please, that doesn't embarrass me. Go on.
With an INTP, their weakest function is FI, so a lot of INTPs don't know what they're feeling, and they usually don't follow what they feel at all. However, you can synthetically create FI in an INTP, because I think if you have a strong enough TI value, you start to FI develop a strong conviction around that. So TI users can artificially create FI, because if you deduce down the principle that makes the most sense, then you can get emotional about it. And so it's like, oh, I can create this fuel of emotion. I just get at that in an indirect way. Whereas like you can channel FI automatically. An INTP has to sideways store it. And with our 5th function, we actually have the capability of being naturally good at this. So they actually say, for an INTP, all of their NT functions are good. So their TI, NE, NI, and TE are actually can be at good strengths if they want it to be, but they just really don't value TE. So yes, you can grow your shadow functions because we all have 8 functions. And if you grow up around people with these functions, you will look like you use these functions. Like, I think I'm an INFJ who can seem like a little bit more FITE-ish because I'm Chinese. And cultural influence really changes things. Because I grew up only around FI users. And so you kind of have to learn to act a little bit more like them because I'm a natural chameleon. And also, as human beings, we're impressionable. And so, yeah, I think you can grow your you can grow all 8 of your functions. It just depends on environmental factors. Because they actually say that personality is half nature, half nurture. So you can just use the nurture to your advantage in a certain sort of way. This is all easier said than done. So.
Yeah, like I hear you. Would you say though that, like, you know, you use the word synthetically a few times there. Would you say that, like, yeah, we can get better at those 5th to 8th functions, but it's more just behaviors? Like, you can't, like, maybe you could say you can't actually develop them to the point where you're using them naturally over your 4 functions, of your main 4 functions. Of course, you're always going to be preferring your normal 4 functions, but you can just sort of, like, as you said, synthetically use the behavior, or show certain behaviors. But then that's just, as you said, nurture. It's not actually using the functions in terms of, like, your brain doesn't prefer those. Like, you can't have those overtake your original functions.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah. Interesting. And if people wanted to, like, kind of think more or learn more about that, where would you direct them?
Yeah, there's John Beebe's 8-function model. There's also a lot of different computing models. I take a little bit of socionics, John Beebe, and Dario Nardi actually talks about the 8-function model too. So there's multiple sources. I actually think all of the information on the 8-function model is scattered. So all of the sources, there's no unifying source, and there's actually no resource on the 8-function model that has comprehensive information that I know of.
Fair enough.
So it's all word of mouth.
Yeah. Just do your own research, guys. Go into all the different... I've done this myself. I've looked at a whole bunch of different sources and kind of reached my own conclusions. Prudently, of course. Do very easy tasks stress you? And I assume this person, because, like, each type would find different tasks easy and hard. So for you, your easy tasks for you wouldn't be the same as easy tasks for me. So your easy task probably wouldn't stress you. But what this person probably means is, like, the day-to-day sensory, mundane, maybe more practical tasks.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's all the answer that's required. Okay, what's something you dislike admitting to be wrong about?
Oh, that means, like, I don't want to say it on camera.
Yeah. Fair enough. Totally fair. That's a hard one to answer as well. I don't know if I'd be able to answer that one on the spot. I never like answering this question, but I thought I would ask it to you. Feel free not to answer if you don't want to. Which types do you tend to best get along with?
I tend to best get along with people who force themselves on me. So I would actually say ENFPs and ENTPs. Actually, what I admire about ENFPs is that when their FI likes someone, they'll actually follow their FI. Like, there's 2 kinds of people: the people who go for what they do want, and the people who avoid what they don't want. I like how ENFPs are actually able to know what they want. And so, like, it was my ENFP friend forcing me to be her best friend. So in a way, there was a compatibility there. It just didn't work out because of certain other factors. But I actually think it is a good pairing. Although I think that I could see myself enjoying any type. because they say like the biggest factor to a successful relationship is shared values. It has nothing to do with type itself. But I do like ENTPs because they are very quick-witted and they inform you of a lot of things, and sometimes it can be enlightening and sometimes it can be exhausting, but it's always a good time. So
It is.
I think
that's for
I
sure.
like EP types. So like ESFPs are really amazing as well because of all the types that I just mentioned are so playful. So I think that they teach me to be more embracing my inner child. So
What don't you understand about ESFPs, if anything?
I don't understand how to get them to see you as a real inner circle friend. Because I know that they're very likable, and I know that they can make people feel like they're their best friend, or like that they're really good. They had a really special moment with them, but then the moment's the moment and then they're done. So like I wondered how you could have like a continued, sustained, deep relationship with an ESFP.
Well, just to quickly answer that, because I know the answer from my own experience, I would say it has nothing to do with personality type and just to do with, as you said, like shared values. And it wouldn't be the same for each ESFP. It just would depend on their values. But I think, I don't know, it's hard because when I was younger, I didn't even really have an inner circle because I didn't need that personal resonance in like the depth of meaning. Do you know what I mean? So, or the people I chose to hang out with were the most fun people. But now that I am where I am in life, I do have an inner circle, a very, very deep inner trusted circle of people who know my heart. And they know my heart, they know my core values, and they've accepted those about me, and they're always willing to like listen and be there for me if I need them, which is a very FI thing to say. But then they also let me be that for them, and they share that with me as well. So, but I wouldn't say that, like maybe I could say that about all ESFPs, because I guess what I've just said is very like when you're younger it's that SE, and then when you grow up it's more like those introverted functions. But yeah, the FI, I sometimes find myself really relating to NFPs, being like, yeah, I just yearn to be understood and heard out. You know, I just yearn for someone to listen to me kind of thing. Does that ring true in your ESFP experience?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that like ESFPs can also deeply enjoy people who give them like a mind boner, because it's like activating the fourth function. They're like, wow, this is a really deep conversation. I didn't know I could enjoy it to this extent.
Yeah, and when the ESFP has decided that they actually need to listen, or like it's in their best interest to contemplate something or find the meaning or the answer to something, and then you've got some NI user just giving you insights, it's like, I just want to listen to you forever, you know? Like my husband's an ENTJ, my best friend's an ENTJ, and I always call my best friend to offer me insights because I'm like, help me to understand this thing that I don't understand. And that's such a valued friendship for me.
And I bet it also helps you understand your husband too, because whenever you have a question about him, it's like, I'm going to ask someone who's similar to him because he baffles me.
Yeah. Yeah, he does baffle me in some sense. But yeah, that does really happen. And I see similarities between them, obviously. Sorry, guys, couldn't resist answering that question there. All right, next question. What are some INFJ stereotypes that you relate to, and are there some that you've never personally experienced?
I can relate to the desire to want to understand people, potential, being the friend who is able to help you uncover the deeper parts of your problem, like the unpaid therapist stereotype. I can relate to the stereotypes of INFJ that I think I mentioned quite a few throughout this interview. I don't know if it made anyone cringe hardcore. So you can kind of understand which are the ones that I relate to. What I don't relate to, I think it's the INFJ door slam. how I've made sense of it to make it relate to me is that INFJs will try to see things from your perspective up until the point that they'll door slam you. So it's like I actually will extend the period of time and then cut you out if you're truly that toxic. But I don't think it gives grace to how much leeway, like, or how much we do try to understand the other perspective. Because what it seems like is like the INFJ will just door slam you at any small thing. Which I hope I'm not like. But I guess I can also see it. Because, like, it does make sense where the INFJ will, like, FE placate you until they get fed up with you and they won't tell you until they door slam you. Which, yeah, I guess I could see.
Mm-hmm. That's good nuance. I appreciate that. I've never, the INFJ door slam I've never experienced it in my life. I've never fully understood why that's a stereotype, to be honest. Doesn't stop me from playing on it in my videos, though.
It is a funny trope, yeah. Feel free to play on it as much as possible.
Thank you.
Because the types, ironically, that I've had door slam me without telling me were like INFPs and ISFPs. So I'm like, maybe it's a feeler thing? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I have thought that myself about INFPs. But even so, I feel like there's always room for getting back into their trust. Like, I do feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll door slam you and then peek like, hey, how are you?
Exactly. That's so true. There's potential for all types to get back into their good books. You know, for human beings in general, you can always get trust back. It's hard work, but you can. Just on that unpaid therapist thing, do you personally like being the unpaid therapist, or are you a little bit like, do you feel used when some people use those, like, come to you and use those gifts of yours to just like rant or vent to you?
Depends. Yeah. I don't want to feel exploited. It does in some way make me feel needed and valued or useful for something, but I also want a reciprocal relationship. So it is a desire for, like, I wish the other person would be curious about me.
Aww.
And I think I'm very masterful of turning the conversation on the other person. So it's kind of my fault because we teach people how to treat us. And so if I'm always making it about the other person, then what do I expect? The other person's going to want that therapy. I also enjoy it too, though, because I told you about how one of my life missions is to understand, like, CPTSD. So I'm like, I get to understand what hurts other people, and it helps me get a larger framework for all of this. So I'm like, fascinating.
Yeah, lovely. I love when people use me as an unpaid therapist. I'm like, they trust me. They think I'm deep enough.
Yeah, I feel really trust too. It's a very loving thing for them to share with you. But there are some people who will do it because they want to take advantage and they don't feel that closeness. But I like it when there is the closeness there. It's like, oh, this is a special moment. Like, I feel honored that you're telling me about this because I know you don't tell everyone about this.
Yeah. How do you deal with being overstimulated by sensory experiences?
I think you just do, because there's no way to stop the barrage.
You just have to.
I actually have earbuds. They don't cancel noise, but they diminish it if you're sensitive to noise, if you're a highly sensitive person. I can relate to aspects of being a highly sensitive person, which is an INFJ stereotype, and also not to others. Yeah, you're just gonna be overstimulated. You might as well enjoy it. You might as well have the kind of overstimulation that you want.
I love that. Accept that the world is sensory, everyone, and enjoy it while you can. Accept that the world is sensory. That's such an ESFP meme thing to say. Everyone's world is different. Your world is probably mostly... I just imagine the way that the INFJs/INTJs see the world is like... For me, it's just like, there's a tree, it's green. And then for you guys, it's just like this overlay, this tapestry on top of the tree of like what the tree means, and the colors are shifted and the shape is distorted.
Exactly.
That's how I imagine your lens.
Yeah. And to bring things back to a previous question, we were talking about INFJs being a mist. And so I think that's the way I prevent overstimulation. In some way, I just remain the mist so that I'm not overly engaged and that I can be the observer.
Be the mist, guys. Self-care. Okay, can an INFJ become like an ESTP? And I guess what's driving this question is the fact that both types use the same functions, but like flipped in their order. The first 4 functions.
You can have moments in stress of being like an ESTP. Like, you're like, what's the point? What matters? I'm just going to do something impulsive.
Does that happen for you, Joyce?
I think so. Yeah, I can have those moments of nihilism and then like throw away my vision and meaning and then be like, all right, let's just do whatever feels good. Let's go. And then there's a moment of, that was reckless.
Yeah. What is the difference between the ESFP reckless and the ESTP reckless?
I think ESTPs are an amoral kind of person combined with recklessness. Not to say they're immoral. It's just that morality isn't a thing that they think about or conceive of because it's too subjective. So I think INFJs, if they get into the grip of their TI and SE, can see that all morality is kind of subjective. Because one person will believe in a thing totally different than the other person. And you're like, this is all kind of meaningless. So I think that's an ESTP. Also, I guess an INFJ can have a kind of banter that can also be kind of, what do you call it, pushing the envelope in certain kind of ways, causing an FE reaction in people, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, what creates a different ESTP banter?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I wonder if ESFPs have a more selective recklessness, because I'm not reckless in the ways that my FI tells me are immoral. And I fully believe that there is a right and wrong with that kind of thing. But I still am reckless, like with my spending habits sometimes, or, you know, the way in which I live my life in other ways. People could definitely still call me reckless. And I wonder if like an ESTP has a more consistent recklessness. I don't even know what that would look like.
Yeah, I think ESTPs have a calculative reckless. So they test things to see if there's opportunity there for them.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like, can I do this tactical move to give me a tactical advantage?
Right. Okay, I find a lot of INFJs have a little bit of a martyr complex. Why do you think this is?
It's because we believe we know what's best for people. And so you're going to try to act in a way where, okay, I know what's best for them. If I don't do it, then I'm purposefully doing the thing that won't help them. Does that mean I'm responsible? So there's a guilt that's associated with it because you already know the best path forward. You're choosing not to do it. I'm being selfish. And so it can be that driving it.
Makes sense. What types are you the most attracted to romantically and why? And platonically and why?
EPs, hands down.
EPs?
Yeah. I think that they're insanely charming, like as friends, as lovers. I'm like a playsexual. I think that like it's really cool to have people who bring up the energy, and I feel like I grew up in such a serious Chinese SJ culture that I feel like SPs are a breath of fresh air. They teach me how to live life. And I want to tap into my inner ESTP. Like, let's go. Like, I need that EP energy. But I think that they teach me something about, like, flowing with the moment. So you're like, EPs are a life lesson in and of themselves. Because, like, I want to be more of that. If I can even be, like, 1% more like an EP, I'd be, like, so much more enlightened. So like, they're my number one choice.
Yeah. Do you think that's because your extroverted perceiving function is like your last, or your aspirational function, as some people would call it?
It's totally aspirational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Let me think if I'm the same with INJs would be my equivalent. No, IJs?
It would be INTJ and INFJ.
Yeah. But you said EPs in general, which encompasses 4 types.
Yeah, because I like the SE ones too, and the NE ones. So yeah, I should be saying ESPs, but the EMPs are also.
Oh, I see, I see. Yeah, well, I love spending time with my INFJ and INTJ friends, that's for sure. I always get value. Like, I always feel like I've learned some golden nugget of wisdom when I talk to them. I really get along well with INTJs, and I appreciate the absolute lack of BS, and they're just giving you authentic, unfiltered themselves, I feel like, a lot of the time.
Yeah. And I guess one of the things I love about you guys is the innate curious explorer in you, where you ask me questions, and I feel like it's this genuine curiosity and desire to learn. Like, EPs are the eternal beginner's mindset, and they just go in, and it's so such a genuine love of wanting to get to know you. Like, people feel it. I think everyone loves EPs. I'm just talking on behalf of most people.
I feel that, and I definitely think that EPs are, that curious explorer type, almost like a child wanting to learn. And sometimes I have really struggled to understand even just the concept of, like, other people who aren't EPs and don't have that same curious explorer mentality. When they approach a social situation, or just like any given situation, with like a wall up or a particular goal that's going to impact how they're going to come off to people, and they have that ability to like it has virtues, of course, like they have that ability to measure themselves and be careful in what they share and how they interact, which is, good in some senses. But sometimes I'm just like, can't you just let go and show people who you really are? And like, why are you above asking questions or admitting that you don't know something, or like, why don't you want to learn? Like, sometimes I feel that. Because life is about learning to me in many ways, I feel that.
Hence this podcast.
Yes, indeed. All right. I've noticed a lot of INFJs have poor SE in terms of body/action, but good in terms of style. Why? Can I venture a guess here?
Yeah.
I think it's because they're so conscious of how they come across to people, and maybe anxious or worried about how they come across to people, especially with that like bottom SE. They want to come across almost like measure or control how they come across, and that's why they pay more attention to their fashion and how they're presenting to people. Whereas, like, I mean, I certainly don't. This is the 3rd day in a row I've worn this t-shirt.
You're rocking it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
it's one
I
of the
think
only ones that fits my pregnant.
it is like the NFJ reaching into their SE, and yeah, it does create like a certain time kind of like we love how things look, but we're not observant. Maybe it's because I don't know. Yeah, I guess NFJs can have a classy-ish way of dressing. Well, I think you're spot on, Kristen. I just go with your answer. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, they're, in my experience, INFJs really do care what they look like and how they come across. They put a lot of effort into the fashion, because it is a given that says something about them. But for me, I look at fashion and that says nothing to me. Like, that says hardly anything to me about the person, really. I don't think you can judge people very much by their fashion. I mean, I guess you could, like, deduce certain insecurities that people have based on how much, I don't know, like, makeup they wear, or, those kinds of things. I'm broadly speaking here. But I think generally speaking, I certainly don't use fashion as a means of working things out about people. But maybe INFJs, I don't know if you would look at someone as an INFJ and deduce something about their fashion and who they are based on their fashion. I like to think you wouldn't, because you're aware that they're that there's depth to everyone, that it can't just be presented in fashion. So maybe it's just a personal thing for them, that it's like a control thing for them, that they need to present themselves in a certain way.
Yeah, it's kind of like you want to give a certain image that you're put together.
Yeah. And you are, which is great. I'll read this question. I'm not sure if it's true. NI DOMs don't seem to experience too many anxiety troubles. Is there a reason?
I think a lot of NI dominants have anxiety issues because human beings have a lot of anxiety issues, possibly about different things that other people do. So we might appear confident like we don't, but I feel like then that, like they say that IJ types, their biggest issue is invulnerability. So it possibly is like they are anxious, but they're invulnerable, so you don't see it.
Yeah, I feel like INFJs, the amount of times I've heard that my INFJ friend went through something after the fact, you know, it'll just casually come up and I'm like, how did you not tell people about this? How did you not tell me about this? You know, and I kind of feel a little bit hurt, but then I'm like, no, Kristen, we're all different. That's fine. But yeah, they certainly seem like the type to want to sort of go through it by themselves, and they seem like they have the tools to do that, which good on them. Can't relate, but good on them.
I'm leaving the space to give off the ISTP mode and help you get through all the questions.
Yeah, we've only got a few left, so this is good. What's the easiest tell between an ISFJ and INFJ?
Do they help you practically? So an ISFJ will want to meet your needs, but it's more of like, did you eat? I remember this detail about you, or you look like you want to go like sleep. Like it's like being attentive of your practical needs. An ISFJ is going to be more detail oriented. They're going to want you to start your stories from beginning to end. So an ISFJ prefers sequential storytelling. So they're like, wait, why didn't you start from the beginning? I don't understand. Like, you just went to the end, that's it? Are you going to tell me? Whereas an INFJ doesn't care for the sequentialness of a story. They care more about the generality of the thing. INFJs will have these thoughts on human beings, and they want to like process in depth with you. An INFJ is also gonna be more intellectual, is what I would say. So you're almost gonna meet a little bit of a philosopher with an INFJ, or with any intuitive type, depending on the intuitive. Whereas for ISFJ, their FE might actually be a little bit more noticeable. In a sense, like I find ESFJs in ISFJs have very obvious FE, whereas it depends on the INFJ if they have obvious FE. Because like some INFJs, you can see the FE right away, and some INFJs, you get more of the contemplative side up front. So it's a vibe thing. And also asking the person if they identify more with SI or NI. Like an ISFJ wants some level of predictability, stability, and routine. And so there's some sort of like, they say that SJs are double Js. So that might give it away. Like if they're super, 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 super organized in a very concrete way, more likely to be an ISFJ. INFJ, organized, but also oblivious to, well, ISFJ can be oblivious to surroundings as well at times. But overall, one of them is like a contemplative philosopher, intellectual, the INFJ, and then the ISFJ is more about practical, grounded, here now realities. So
that's a really good explanation. Good job.
Yay.
Yay. Be honest, do you have a superiority complex, Joyce?
Oh, yeah. I have a friend called Denzel. He has this idea called the God complex. And yes, there is a little bit of a superiority complex in terms of, like I said earlier, I think I know what's best for other people. And sometimes, like, I might sway a situation so that I think I know what's best for you, so I'm going to make things happen so it's best for you. And that's a superiority complex, because I think I know what's good for you better than what you know is good for you. And this can be a little bit, oh, like, Joyce, you think you're that able to know people? Like, what are you? Who do you think you are? With superiority complexes, they actually come from having an inferiority complex. So they're both forms of overcompensation. So yeah, I think in some ways, because I'm not practical in the world, I'm like, might as well feel superior about where I think the direction of things could be going. Like, when I deal with my parents, I have a superiority complex because I think they're penny wise, pound foolish. And I'm like, wow, you're so good at managing, like, the details, but, like, you don't care about the overall picture of your relationship together, because, like, their relationship is in ruins. And I'm like, but you don't care about the sustainability of that, but you care about how much the shoe costs. So that's where I can get judgmental and superior.
No, fair enough. Yeah, I love the honesty. What is something about Myers-Briggs that you think a lot of people gloss over?
I mentioned it earlier in this podcast, and it's Isabel Briggs Myers wanted this to be a tool for world peace. And I think that people could use this tool more to create a world of peaceful understanding. And I think oftentimes we use it to create wars. So people use it as a way to provoke other people or to get upset and angry at other people. It becomes an identity war. And I hope that we're able to use this in a way where we're able to benefit each other, so that people looking on the outside are like, isn't it so great to know the Myers-Briggs? Those people look so happy after knowing about it. I want our lives to be a testament to how good this tool can be. So I think that's an unexplored territory of type. It's like using it for personal development. Because I think you have a lot of intuitives using it as like intellectual debate fodder. And so when it could be actually practically applied, we need to bring it to the sensory. And using it for love is essentially where I'm bringing this to. I think when we do things to bring us closer to a sense of purpose or a sense of love, it feels fulfilling. It's satiating for the soul. Like, we can feel physically like our hunger is satiated, but we can also feel like our hearts and souls are satiated. And so I find that if we use this tool more to help us improve our relationships, create lives where we don't want to escape from it because we enjoy our lives more, I think that that's a wonderful use of the tool.
Yeah, I agree. So that is all of the Instagram questions that we are going to have time for today. I thank you to everyone who submitted some questions. I now have just a couple of questions I wanted to ask Joyce from me. First of all, Joyce, before we turned on the microphone, so we were talking about your book, which is very fascinating. Joyce was running me through a book that she is writing. I'm very excited about it, having just heard about it, but she's taken me through it, and I already was like, wow, you have found really succinct ways of explaining some like essential principles about Myers-Briggs. So that's still a little while from being released, but could you tell us a little bit about that, or what you're trying to achieve with that, or just how you're feeling about it?
Yeah, so I created a theory of type, and the reason why I did this is I wanted to make it accessible to the average person. So I once had a friend tell me type is so elitist because it's so hard to understand for the new person. And I can actually understand where she's coming from. And so I was like, what if we created something in which it was simpler to understand, yet keeps the complexity of type? Certain people say you only understand something if you're able to reduce it down to its simplest parts and describe it to a fifth grader. So that's what I was trying to do essentially with this theory. And it's made of 6 lenses. So the first one is your why in decision making. The second one is the information you focus on and what you overlook. The third is your personality's blueprint and driving force. The fourth is your persona in action. The fifth is your relationship style. And the sixth is how you direct and use your energy, your life movement. And so I think by making these catchy, associating cute icons with them, I'm trying to use that 16 personality strategy of creating these cute avatars and help people get into type. So this has the complexity of type, the cognitive functions, and the stuff that we love, but saying it in a way where anyone can use it.
Amazing.
So,
yep. And I can say I've had a look at some of it that Joyce has shown me. And I think that you really have succeeded in taking some complex principles and distilling them down into words with higher explanatory value than we're used to in the community, I must say. So good job with that. Looking forward to reading it. And I'll just ask, what is one thing you've learned about yourself in writing this book?
I learned that I thrive in collaboration. No surprise given my YouTube channel and how it's talking to many different people. But I find that it's hard for me to feel motivated if there's not another party involved. So although I created this theory, I'm actually writing a book with multiple people because I need that to feel the fuel to continue it. Because I don't want to be another INFJ who I have these amazing ideas and it goes into the void. You never send it to anyone. No one knows about it. It dies with you.
It goes into the void. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think thanks for the feedback on the theory. It's my baby. So you're going to have a baby. You saw my baby. We're all that closer for it.
That's right. Yeah. Well, keep your eyes peeled for that one, guys. I also had a question about Enneagram. You've mentioned it a few times here, and I had a few questions submitted to me about Enneagram. And I mean, I haven't really got into it much myself. I don't have the time / attention span / I'm a little bit like, Myers-Briggs works for me, so I'm happy to stop there. Do you think that people should get into it? And if so, what is your best pitch for why people should dive into that, like as well as Myers-Briggs, or do you think one is superior? Or
yeah, as you know, my channel is mostly Myers-Briggs, so I do prefer a system, but I do think that the Enneagram is amazing. And I find that it's a tool where you can readily learn about your dark side. The Myers-Briggs too, but like the Myers-Briggs has the criticism of focusing too much on the positive side. And it's just about how people are currently talking about it. The Enneagram is purposefully negative because it was created by an INTP. So the creator of the Enneagram there were quite a few. There were 2 main figures. The first one was an ENTP, and he brought the psycho-spiritual side. So the Enneagram is a very spiritual tool in learning about ways in which you can become this best, most actualized version of yourself. Then he handed it over to an INTP, and he made it super negative. He wrote character and neurosis. And so I think the Enneagram shows you the things that make you cringe about yourself, the things that, you might not want to look at. And I think that there's value in that because the Enneagram is traditionally used a lot in therapy. And it's for the reason that it looks at your dark side. And so if Carl Jung and all those Jungians talk about shadow work, Enneagram is a way that you can do shadow work. And it's also a way in which you confront your deepest core fears, your defense mechanisms, and you learn about your instinctual drives. And so the Enneagram has the concept of head, heart, and gut. So you learn about your passion, which is the vice of your heart. And so you learn also the vice of your mind and the vice of your instincts. And so it's essentially, it keeps you in check. If you want cold water thrown at your face, then I recommend looking at the Enneagram because it teaches you something about yourself where you're like, I should improve that about me. Or it's this place where you can do deep work on yourself. There are creators like Beatrice Chestnut that create things like the Inner Retreat, which is essentially you go deep into your soul, talking about your Enneagram type and also your deepest trauma ever. So it's a way to have FI work. So if you need to process something in your life, the Enneagram is a very good catharsis for that. That's my selling point.
Fascinating. Sounds great. Thank you for sharing. Well, I think that's probably it for the questions that I'm happy to ask right now, just because of the time stamp. I froth talking to you, Joyce. I wish I could talk to you for another 3 hours. But I think we're going to wrap it up there. So my last question for you is, I guess, if you could choose one thing to tell the Myers-Briggs community about INFJs, what would it be? Whether it be something that's misunderstood or something you want people to know about INFJs in general.
INFJs oftentimes feel one-sided in relationships, so a way that you could help an INFJ is to show curiosity in their inner world or about their inner worlds. Because I think that INFJs, they love exploring the inner landscape of other people's minds, and also having someone explore their inner landscape of their mind is the most intimate thing you could do. So if you can pry into their mind's eye, their perspective, that means a lot to them because they're used to hiding it, intuitive blending, so that they can fit in. But that's a side of themselves they could really benefit with having someone else just ignite that fire of curiosity in them. It's a really nice thing, and we're always looking for more hope in the world, and you can give an INFJ more hope in their life by inquiring about them.
Yeah, 100%. You just got to look out for those little tactics where they try and turn it back on you and make you talk about yourself. Sneaky. If someone does that, if an INFJ does that, is that a sign that they don't appreciate me probing? Like, that they kind of... Because sometimes I'm like, does that mean they don't want to talk? Like, have I probed too far?
It could be it's their reflex. It's usually a reflex.
Right, okay. Fair enough. Can't relate. But yeah, that is great advice, and that's advice that has absolutely rung true in my INFJ relationships. And yeah, I did a video called How to Make INFJs Feel Loved, where INFJs submitted their response about how they feel most loved by their loved ones, and that was the answer. Like, ask about my inner world. Like, make me feel like it's a reciprocal relationship where you care about my deepest thoughts and feelings. So yeah. Those listening who have INFJ relationships, take that on board. Joyce, it's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything that you'd like to maybe do a cheeky plug for? Are you still doing typing sessions?
Yeah, so if you'd like to discover your type or need some guidance on your type journey, feel free to book a consultation. Also, feel free to watch Type Talks. Kristen is there. She's amazing. And I'd love to have you on future episodes, Kristen. I'm going to drag you on.
Always enjoy Type Talks. I always learn something about myself. And I feel 100% confident in plugging Joyce's services because you just have such... Not only do you have an incredibly empathic way of speaking to people, but your motives and your intentions are so very clearly good and wholesome and pure. And I literally have never felt judged, and I think everyone feels like your spaces are very safe spaces to talk about themselves and their tendency with type, and I think your channel is a testament to that, how many people feel comfortable to come on and talk. So I think you're doing really good work, and you have met so many people of each of the different types, so I truly trust that you have really refined and built these patterns about type, like Myers-Briggs typology, that you can speak about with legitimate authority. So, good job.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I always direct people towards your channel, so always feel free to like, subscribe, all the things. Go to Kristen's Patreon. She's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much, Joyce. Great. Well, thank you for being here, Joyce, and I'm looking forward to having you on some other time.
Cool.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Literally No Subtext podcast. Don't forget to check out Joyce's links in the show notes of this episode below. It's been a hot minute since I've recorded an episode for this podcast. I have been pregnant and still been trying to upload to the main channel and backlogging some content for maternity leave so that I can keep our income during the break. This pod does not contribute to my income, so it's not been a priority, unfortunately, but I am super close to being monetized on the podcast YouTube channel, so if you'd like to help me financially during maternity leave, please consider going and subscribing to the Literally No Subtext YouTube channel. I just need, I think, 14 more subs before the channel is monetized, but as usual, no pressure. If you enjoyed this episode and you're on a podcast platform that allows ratings, I'd sure appreciate it if you could leave a rating. If you're interested in checking out more MBTI content, please head over to my YouTube channel, Dear Kristen, the main channel, to see my skits. Share them around if you enjoy them. Or my Instagram page, dear.kristen, that's Kristin, if you'd like to see some of my favourite comments from YouTube and some of the random other chaotic and inconsistent passion projects that I do. We also have a thriving Discord community, which you can join by becoming a patron over on the Patreon page or signing up to the YouTube memberships on my channel, links below. As always, please feel free to leave me your thoughts on this episode by either messaging me directly on Instagram or posting a comment on this episode on the YouTube channel. And final note, my baby is due in like 2 weeks, so you might not be hearing from me for a while here. I am recording another episode this week, but I don't know whether I'll be able to fit in editing it, so let's see. And thank you for your understanding. I am looking forward to having a break and beginning this very exciting journey in my life. So thanks again for listening, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!